Okay, let's dive into an explainer that is literally going to completely reshape how you view one of history's most famous figures. When I say the name Pythagoras, you're probably instantly thinking of, triangles, chalkboards, and those rigid mathematical proofs from high school. But today we're exploring the massive gap between the myth we've all been spoon-fed and the actual historical reality. And honestly, it's a wild story full of cults, cosmic music, and how an ancient mystic kinda accidentally laid the exact groundwork for modern quantum physics.
So I want you to just completely wipe the slate clean. Forget the stuffy academic sitting in a desk solving equations, because the truth about Pythagoras is way stranger and a whole lot more fascinating than fiction. According to leading historical research, the man himself might not have been a mathematician at all, at least not in the modern sense. He was actually something much more enigmatic.
Section 1. The mathematician myth, shattering the illusion. The modern view basically paints Pythagoras as this master scientist, the genius who famously invented the a squared plus b squared equals c squared theorem, right? Well, the historical reality is quite a bit different. He was actually a charismatic mystic, more of a religious guru, really. And that famous theorem? Yeah, evidence actually shows it was already well known by the Babylonians and the Chinese at least 1,000 years before Pythagoras was even born. So no, he didn't invent it, he likely just folded it into his own deeply spiritual worldview.
In fact, modern academic research highlights this exact ongoing debate. Was Pythagoras a mathematician, or was he a mystic? For decades, historians just kind of assumed he was a man of science. But modern scholarship, especially sparked by researchers like Walter Burkert, reveals that in his own time, Pythagoras was actually famous for being a guru who founded a strict, puritanical, and highly alternative religious lifestyle.
So if he wasn't spending his days sitting around solving equations, what exactly was he doing? Let's move to Section 2, the mystic and his cult, a way of life.
He was busy establishing the bios Pythagoricos, the Pythagorean way of life. And let me tell you, it was governed by some truly fascinating and frankly bizarre rules. The whole thing started with this core belief that humans are the literal property of the gods. So naturally, every single action had to be oriented towards serving the divine. This meant ritualized daily purifications, but interestingly, they also introduced the standardization of weights and measures, which essentially took numbers away from just being a tool for merchants and applied them to cosmic order. Oh, and then there were the dietary rules. Most famously, they had a strict, deadly serious taboo against eating beans. Yeah, beans. Some of his followers literally believed beans were made of the exact same material as humans, making eating them basically cannibalism. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up.
Now, this strict way of life was entirely tied to their belief in metempsychosis, which is a fancy word for the transmigration of the soul or reincarnation. But here's the crucial part. This wasn't about punishment. The journey of the soul wasn't retributive. They believed that when the soul leaves the body at death, it enters a new one. Could be human, could be animal, but it wasn't to pay for past sins. It was a deliberate journey to gain universal experience. The ultimate goal? To acquire deep cosmic wisdom by living through multiple varied lifetimes.
And Pythagoras didn't just teach this, he absolutely lived it. Well, actually scratch that. He lived them. He famously claimed to possess the incredibly rare ability to actually remember his past lives. This included a previous incarnation as a guy named Aethalides, who, get this, just so happened to be the mortal son of the god Hermes. It is such a wild historical anecdote, but it perfectly highlights just how far removed the real Pythagoras was from our modern image of a rational academic. To his followers, the guy was literally a divine being.
Which brings us to Section 3, Reality is built on numbers, the architecture of the cosmos. And here is where the story takes a really interesting turn, because his highly mystical beliefs accidentally laid the groundwork for modern science.
You see, to Pythagoras, numbers were not just tools for counting sheep or measuring grain. No way. They were the literal, physical building blocks of reality. And of all the numbers, no number was more sacred, more powerful, or more divine than the number 10. The number 10 was visually represented by something called the tetractys. This is an equilateral triangle made up of exactly 10 points, formed by adding the first 4 numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But this wasn't just some neat little math trick. For them, this was the actual blueprint of how the 3D universe was constructed. Think about it. 1 represents a single solitary point. 2 points, that creates a one-dimensional line. 3 points create a two-dimensional plane, like a flat triangle. And then 4 points create a three-dimensional solid, a tetrahedron. You add them all up, they equal 10. It's literally the sacred architecture of the cosmos itself. And because they believed reality was built on numbers, they organized all of existence into the Pythagorean table of opposites.
Basically, they paired mathematical concepts directly with moral ones. So they believed that limit and odd numbers were these active forces of order, light, and good. On the flip side, the unlimited and even numbers represented chaos, darkness, and evil. For Pythagorean, absolutely everything in the universe, and even inside your own soul, was just this massive balancing act of numerical opposites, constantly trying to find harmony.
Okay, Section 4. The music of the spheres, cosmic symphony. Let's see how this intense numerical obsession perfectly synced up with their understanding of music and the stars.
The real eureka moment for the Pythagoreans was discovering that the most pleasing musical harmonies are governed by simple, whole-number mathematical ratios. It's like this. If you take a string on a lyre and pluck it, and then pluck another string that has exactly half its length, so a 2-to-1 ratio, you get a perfect octave. A 3-to-2 ratio gives you a perfect fifth. 4-to-3 gives a perfect fourth. They suddenly realized that sound and music weren't just random. They were governed by the exact same numbers found in the divine tetractys.
So their logic went like this. If the microcosm, like the physical vibrating strings on a lyre, is governed by perfect mathematical ratios to create beautiful music, well then the macrocosm must be too. They looked up at the planets and theorized that their vast, rushing orbits through space must be governed by the exact same mathematical proportions. This meant they believed the universe itself was producing this grand cosmic symphony that was constantly playing. We just couldn't hear it because, well, we've been hearing it in the background since birth. They called this the music of the spheres. And look, it is a stunningly beautiful, incredibly poetic idea. But it was so persuasive that it actually totally derailed astronomy for centuries. Seriously, early astronomers were so convinced the universe simply must operate on musical scales that they spent 1,500 years on a wild goose chase. They literally tried to fit the planets into physical, moving crystal spheres just to make the math perfectly match the 7 notes of a musical scale.
All right, Section 5, From Mysticism to Science, an Accidental Legacy. Because despite leading early astronomers slightly astray there, this obsession with numbers did something absolutely incredible for humanity. According to authoritative texts from institutions like Cambridge University Press, the historical influence of Pythagoreanism is just vast. His ideas didn't just fade away when his commune in southern Italy ended. They heavily influenced Plato, who baked them right into Western philosophy. And later, during the scientific revolution, absolute giants like Copernicus and Kepler proudly considered themselves Pythagoreans. They were deeply, fundamentally driven by this Pythagorean conviction that the cosmos is mathematically ordered, and that finding that order is literally the highest form of human inquiry.
Consider how this concept connects the ancient past directly to the 20th century. If you compare the physical system of a musical scale, which Pythagoras studied, to a hydrogen atom, which modern physicist Niels Bohr studied to help develop quantum mechanics, the parallels are amazing. Just like Pythagoras found that pitches relate to simple ratios, Bohr found that the colors of light emitted by a hydrogen atom relate to simple mathematical ratios too. The methodology is exactly the same.
And that leads us to this massive takeaway. By looking at a physical system, finding its characteristic frequencies, and then finding simple mathematical relationships between them, Pythagoras inadvertently birthed spectroscopy. And today, spectroscopy is at the absolute heart of modern science. His deeply mystical search for divine musical ratios in the universe actually created the very scientific framework we use to understand atomic physics and quantum mechanics today. It's mind-blowing.
Which brings us right back to that core Pythagorean maxim: all things are numbers. We really have to remember that, to him and to his followers, mathematics wasn't just some abstraction. It wasn't just something humans invented to, balance a checkbook or build a bridge. Number was the literal, physical, and spiritual fabric of reality itself. By understanding numbers, you could purify your soul, harmonize with the cosmos, and ultimately, touch the divine.
So, I want to leave you with a profound question, one that actually still haunts physicists, mathematicians, and philosophers to this very day. Is mathematics simply a clever invention of the human mind, just a tool we created? Or is it, exactly as Pythagoras believed, a fundamental discovery of the universe's hidden architecture? Are we inventing the math, or are we just finally learning to read the source code of reality? Definitely something to think about next time you hear a musical chord or look up at the stars.